Hello and welcome to this impromptu Manchester City Talking City podcast from the Manchester Evening News. My name is Seb Parkinson. You may remember me from such episodes as Kevin De Bruyne is finished and other episodes. But we're going to be a bit more serious today, and I've got Simon Bajkowski online with me to talk about this latest update with what's going on with Manchester City and the Premier League charges that they face. Basically, just to give us a bit of an explainer for people like myself who may not really know what's going on, who think that they know or feel that they know, but somebody that definitely does know is Simon Bajkowski, our chief Manchester City writer. And this has all come in light of news that Everton and Nottingham Forest are potentially going to lose more points. Well, Everton specifically. Everton have released a statement on this, which I'll read out for you in a second. But before we go any further, Si, from your perspective, like, how long has this been coming?
Has what been coming?
So this potential point deductions for Everton and Forest, and people getting up in arms about why City haven't been charged. Like, I imagine your inbox is being filled up with requests like what I've sent you basically today, saying, "Can you come and talk about it?"
Yeah. I don't know what I like least, to be honest, talking about these things or seeing other people talk about them, because there's so much nonsense that goes about, and it's very challenging because there are sort of keywords and buzz phrases, and FFP is one of them, and you get PSR, and none of those really relate to sort of the charges against Manchester City. So it's it all kind of relates back to that. So he's lumped with that. So yeah, I mean the Premier League brought in these profitability and sustainability rules, PSR, which is their sort of updated version of financial fair play, FFP, which was the UEFA system, to make sure that clubs spend within their means and don't overspend. It sort of, it was brought in after, the first set of rules were brought in after Portsmouth, sort of way back, sort of 15, 16 years ago, to try and ensure that clubs didn't go out of business trying to sort of spend beyond the means to compete with other clubs. So the essence of it, and the latest sort of PSR rules that Everton and Forest failed, is the not being able to have more than £105 million worth of losses over 3 seasons, which is, that is an attempt at sustainable businesses, which means that you don't spend more than you earn, basically, which is understandable. The sort of criticisms of that that City kind of first took on head on when they were pushing to go to the top is that, if you have owners who are willing to pump in lots of money and have the cash and don't mind racking up the losses, is it not anti-competitive to say that they cannot do that when, financially they can, because they're prepared to take the hits, and they will do that. But to say that you have to stick to a system, and Newcastle lately have been banging that drum and saying that, they are being forced to sell players before they can buy, and forced to sell sort of homegrown players because you get more profit for those players. And surely the point of the financial rules devised is not that you sell off your best academy talents. So everyone submitted their accounts, I think, at the end of December. So, Nottingham Forest and Everton will have known their situation when they submitted it, and will have known, presumably, that the Premier League would be ready to sanction them.
Yeah, so back in November, Everton were deducted 10 points for a £19.5 million overspend in 21-22 and are awaiting an outcome on their appeal. Now, today, as I'm speaking on Tuesday, the 16th of January, Everton have released a statement. I'm just going to read that statement out in full. Everton Football Club acknowledges the Premier League's decision to refer a breach of profit and sustainability rules, PSR, for the assessment period ending with the 22-23 season to an independent Premier League commission. This relates to a period which covers seasons 19-20, 2021, 21-22 and 22-23. It therefore includes financial periods 19-20, 2021 and 21-22, for which the club has already received a 10-point sanction. The club is currently appealing that sanction. The Premier League does not have any guidelines which prevent a club being sanctioned for alleged breaches in financial periods, which have already been subject to punishment, unlike other governing bodies, including the EFL. As a result, and because of the Premier League's new commitment to deal with such matters in season, in inverted commas, the club is in a position where it has had no option but to submit a PSR calculation, which remains subject to change pending the outcome of the appeal. The club must now defend another Premier League complaint, which includes the very same financial periods for which it has already been sanctioned. Before that appeal has even been heard, the club takes the view that the results from a clear deficiency in the Premier League's rules. Everton can assure its fans that it will continue to defend its position during the ongoing appeal and, should it be required to do so, at any future commission, and that the impact on supporters will be reflected as part of that process. Now, Si, I'm reading that and I'm like, I don't really understand what any of that means.
There's a lot to take in, and I'm not sure I've got it all. But as far as I can make out, Everton accepted that they had breached the rules, and their sort of tribunal with the independent panel, which the Premier League referred them to for having breached the rules, they were sort of arguing mitigation for why they had breached the rules and things like they deemed that money spent on the new stadium shouldn't be included as loss because it's investment and it's investing in the city and jobs, and people say, and that was deemed that maybe it wasn't, and also the independent panel ruled whether Everton got a sporting advantage from overspending, and Everton insisted that they didn't, and the panel sort of said, well, we can't really say that you didn't because you spent more than everyone else. So, as I said earlier, the PSR rules are over a 3-year period. So Everton have been done for a 3-year period. They're now being done for sort of the latest 3-year period. And they're saying that you've already done us for this is double jeopardy. And the Premier League are kind of saying, no, these are the rules that you signed up to. Like, it is unfortunate if you breach it in consecutive years, and some might say it's arguably difficult to get out. If you breached it for 1 year, then you may well breach it for the second year. But Premier League say these are the rules, and this is what you've done. And talk about the sort of quotation marks of in season. Well, this does relate to Man City a bit, really, because City were charged last February. February 2023. And it's taken a very long time because their case is not really PSR, but is sort of, more to do with sort of fraud. So, but you always get why are you not punishing City? Why haven't you punished City yet? The cry from fans of other clubs, also from clubs themselves to the Premier League. Why have you not punished Man City? So the Premier League, towards the end of last season, said, we know what, cases such as Man City's are very separate and complex, but you've all got to submit your accounts to us for these PSR rules. And where it is straightforward and where we can see it's just a case of, have you breached these rules, yes or no? It's just a case of, does this number meet the criteria? Then we will fast track these cases and deal with the punishments and the sanctions quickly, and then everyone's happy. And not everyone's completely happy because they still want urgency on the Man City case, but on the cases where it's more black and white, we will deal with it quickly. So everyone agreed to that and everyone signed up to that. And now that Everton and Forest have been charged, Everton and others are, well, why are you punishing us so quickly when Man City still haven't been charged? And, the Premier League chief exec was at a committee hearing from the government today on Tuesday, and was asked that it doesn't look good optics wise that you're punishing clubs that aren't sort of the size of Man City, and you haven't punished Man City. And the truth is that, well, they haven't punished Man City yet. They may well do, but it will take a lot more time.
For the man on the street then, is this a sort of a case of it's a much bigger case, therefore it takes a lot more time to process, whereas the Everton and the Forest one is a much smaller case study and therefore it's much quicker to process? Is that sort of why Everton and Forest have been sort of announced now and City's still ongoing, or is it just a completely different case altogether?
It is completely different. I would say sort of, Everton and Forest have accepted a fine for speeding, and they are arguing over whether they deserve however many points on their license, or just a fine, or just a warning. City have been accused of multiple murders, and they're not just saying that they're not guilty of the murders, they're saying that the murders never took place in the first place. So the Premier League have to put together all this evidence that supports their claim, and because the claims are so enormous, they have to sort of provide a lot of convincing evidence for the most serious charges. And City have every right to, put together defence for everything they've been accused of. So they are completely different. And like I say, it sort of does blend into the profit and sustainability rules. But if you're talking about the seriousness of City's rap sheet, then PSR would come a long, long way down that. So, yeah, they are just very different. And also City's, the accusations of City span more than a decade. So you've also got to take that into account. So you can see why people think that City have got off with it, or City might be getting special treatment, but they're not really. And, there's a report last week that Everton have hired like a top lawyer for their appeal of the 10 points, and the Premier League will have very good lawyers. So again, the notion that City will get off because they have expensive lawyers is ridiculous, because everyone will have very good lawyers in the process. So, the sort of conspiracy theory that the champions are being protected is quite funny, given the way they were targeted in the first place.
Yeah, and you've written a piece about this today. So for anybody listening that thinks that, rather than going on Twitter or any of those other websites, they want to actually read the actual proper story about what's going on, there's some really good pieces by Simon on the subject. But just from the piece you've written today, the line that I want to highlight, it says the champions were charged last year with over 100 breaches of competition rules across more than a decade, with the most grave accusations being that they misrepresented their finances for 9 whole seasons. If those charges are proven, the Blues could be looking at severe points deduction, if not expulsion. So with what Richard Masters said today about the trial date has been set, do you have any indication when that'll be, or is it just sort of pushing it further away by saying, yes, we've set a date, but you don't know what we're not telling you that date?
Yeah, I mean, he's not said a date, and that is in keeping with the sort of the privacy in which the whole investigation and charge has been kept. There was a report the back end of last year that it would be heard around November 2024, which would allow for kind of everything to be heard, which would be weeks, maybe stretching into months. And then there would be time for an appeal, and then everything would be cleared up before the end of the 24-25 season, which would make sense, but you never know.
The City insists that they have an irrefutable body of evidence that supports their position that they have done nothing wrong. So If that is the case and City prove that they've done anything wrong, case closed, everything ends. But then, is there a case that if it turns out that City are innocent, they could counter sue the Premier League?
I think there is a chance, but whether it would be wise to do so is another matter. Like, I think it's theoretically possible because City could, if City are cleared of all charges, say, or even the most serious charges, because I'd be surprised if they were cleared of all charges, given the sort of the non-cooperation charges in there. You know, they may well have suffered reputational damage, and they could point to that if they have done. I mean, the thing is, they have gone on to keep signing pretty lucrative sponsorship deals during this period. So maybe they could point to sponsors saying, we're going to pay you less because of this, but I'm not aware of that. But, say they were cleared of the most serious stuff, they could. However, whether they would want to is another matter completely. I've not got the Man City statement up from Feb 2023, but I think it says at the end they look forward to putting the matter to rest once and for all. And I think that is how they would want it to be, essentially. It would be a bit like the Court of Arbitration for Sport appeal when they were cleared after UEFA had punished them, and UEFA and City have built bridges after that, and are closer than they were, and it is apocalyptic enough really for the Premier League and City to be going at each other as they are. So were they to carry that on for another round, I think it would kind of be unnecessary. They are partners at the end of the day. City as shareholders, part of the Premier League. It's the Premier League taking on one of its own members in its guise as regulator. So, whether you would want another round of expensive fights between the two, I'm not sure City would, even if it was possible.
Do we feel that a lot of this has come about because of the sort of talks for an independent regulator? Does it feel that the Premier League are saying, no, we want to get in control, and that's sort of why there feels about the potentially, a bit of feet stamping going on? Or is it just coincidence that all this has happened around the chat of an independent regulator?
Yeah, it's funny. There was certainly a feeling at City that the Premier League charges against them were politically motivated because they came out the day before this government white paper was set to be announced, calling for an independent regulator. And the Premier League charges against them, when it did come out, were kind of so rushed and slapdash that not all of, when they put the statement out on their website, not all the charges tallied up to the actual offences that City were meant to have caused. So it felt like after a lengthy investigation of several years, then you might have made sure that your sort of final one-page summary was accurate and didn't have sort of several errors on it. And I spoke to Kieran Maguire, who's like a football finance expert, on whether just his views at the time, and he was sort of under no illusions that it wasn't a coincidence at all. Now, in the time since that has happened, City have gone from being sort of collateral damage to the Premier League's battle with the government to now being seen as protected by the Premier League, and Everton and Forest are collateral damage because these charges were announced the day before Richard Masters has appeared at a government select committee. So maybe it is a coincidence, but it felt there was an air of suspicion to the idea of a coincidence when City were charged, and the same thing happening twice with different clubs would probably add to that suspicion rather than take away from it.
Just while you were talking then, I got the statement up from Man City from February last year, and it says exactly what you said. As such, we look forward to this matter being put to rest once and for all. But it's quite interesting that the statement opens with Manchester City FC is surprised by the issuing of these alleged breaches of the Premier League rules, particularly given the extensive engagement and vast amount of detailed materials that the English Premier League has been provided with. Moving on to the final section, side that I just want to quickly run through with you. off the back of all of this, there's an article gone up today on the Manchester Evening News that says Premier League to change, in inverted commas, spending rules amid Man City and Man United's FFP concerns. What does that even mean? Can you explain what that means, if anything? Because I see a lot of fans talking about players signing, but then it's, well, you can't sign that player because of FFP, and it feels like the fun of talking about transfers now seems to be being spoiled by this three-letter phrase FFP. So
yeah,
if that is a thing, like, what is it?
The thing is, like, FFP, a bit like VAR, has just become kind of a convenient bogeyman for a lot of clubs. You know, like the whole thing at the minute of PSR being like you can't kind of spend more than you can't accumulate too many losses. Well, like Manchester United's revenue before City announced their most recent one was a record ever in the world. United had record revenue. So for them to be saying that they're worried about PSR, well, they must have spent a lot of money on bad investments and bad signings. And, you don't need to look at spreadsheets or whatever to see that. But, it's not really PSR's fault if they can't go and spend money on whoever they want, because they have the revenue to spend enormous amounts of money, and they have spent enormous amounts of money. They just haven't spent the money on players who've given them any form of return. You look at the money that City will make from progress in the Champions League all the way, and the broadcast pot, and the prize money and things like that, and that all adds up on top of sales. And again, a club like United have been pretty terrible at selling players, so they haven't been able to bring in that money. So yeah, the Premier League are looking at tweaking their rules. There's a call to bring it more in line with the new UEFA system, which is kind of a revenue to like cost percentage, which a percentage would make sense. I think it would be more sensible to be a percentage because each club has a different amount of money available to them because they all have different owners, and you can see that 105 million to one club is very different to 105 million to another. So a percentage would make more sense, but it still won't please everyone. And the thing is with these Everton and Forest sanctions is, as has been said to City countless times, if you don't like the FFP rules, if you don't like the Premier League rules, don't sign up to them, because once you sign up to them, you've got to play by them. So, as unhappy as people may be at that clubs and unhappy as City have been, when they were charged back in 2014 or whatever, you've signed up to those rules, so you have to play by them, because it's not fair on all the other clubs that have played by the rules. And this sort of isn't like a top six versus everyone else thing with Forest and Everton, because there's a load of clubs around Forest and Everton who have complied with the rules and shouldn't be sort of punished for doing that.
Brilliant. Well, Si, what a great way to end. Thank you for everybody for listening to this impromptu middle of the week Manchester City Talking City podcast from the Manchester Evening News. I'm sure in Friday's show there'll be a lot more talk about this as things develop, if anything develops at all. But as especially with the story around Forest and Everton develop, and the talk of why are Man City not being charged continues. But for now, Si, thanks very much for joining me, and hope you've enjoyed this educational experience with Simon Bajkowski. I don't know anybody better in the world to talk about this subject, so I thought I'll jump on with Si and have a quick chit chat. But if you like what you're hearing, Simon's on Twitter at SP Bajko, and of course you can leave us a 5-star review, please, and subscribe to the pod, and we will be back, either myself or somebody else in the hot seat with Simon on Friday. Thanks for listening. Catch you in a bit.